welcome to anyone tuning in. G'day. How are you all?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Thank you everyone for the reschedule. My bad. Turns out I was in another country and had my time zones all off. But yes, I arrived back late yesterday, and so thankfully we could move this today. We are recording this. This does get recorded and have been uploading it to YouTube from here. So last week's episode is also available on YouTube for anyone to watch anytime. Big thank you to all the many people that shared comments and reached out, either said thanks, maybe had another question. A lot of people seem to have gone back and rewatched the first recording that we did and got a lot of insight from that. I definitely got quite a few thank yous from people that felt like they got a lot of value and learned something from it. So that's a tick, I think, for us of the whole goal of what we're trying to do with this. We want to share our insights, share our knowledge, give back to the design community, to our people, our tribe, and yeah, do it in the best broadcastable way that we can, I think, to reach as many people at once. Anyway, that's enough talking. How were your weeks, Erica and Joanne? How you guys going? You good?
Yeah, it's been a good week. A little busy. Lots of great calls with people and learning. I really love to talk to everyone and just hear like their perspectives on the hiring market, what's happening, like whether it's a director or an IC or a junior designer, even sometimes. It's really, I like to hear what people are thinking, I guess. And it's, it's helpful talking to our clients, right? Sort of, yeah, it's really nice to talk to people and figure it out. I have long conversations with people. If anyone's ever talked to me, they sometimes go for like an hour. But
I love that.
A fireside chat.
Yep. Yes, basically.
Cool. Yeah, my week's been good too. I had drinks with somebody that that we helped place in a job a couple months ago, big product leader. So it's great to hear how he's doing in the job and all of his insights that's come out of that. And then I've got my singing gig tonight. So I'm sort of like Thursdays are like my between two worlds days. So in an hour, I'm going to have my entire head up in hot rollers and fake eyelashes, and it's just going to be like another me. So
right.
Yeah, I'm gonna try out some new songs.
We need to schedule this to cross over with a bit of that, so you can turn up on this with the rollers in. That would be my vibe.
Totally, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, look, let's try and get into it. A reminder to please share questions, share anything you can, put them in the comments. Share those burning questions that you have, because that is exactly what we will try to cover and try to answer. It really guides us. It really gives us something to go off to give you the exact info that you're looking for. But I know that each of us went around and kind of asked our networks a little bit about what they might want to hear in the next live stream. But yeah, maybe Erica, Joanne, you could kick us off with a little bit of like maybe what some people were hoping to learn about, and then we can start sharing some insights and perspectives on that. Any initial topics maybe that you think people were wanting to
Joanne,
to hear about?
You go first.
Sure. I'm just looking at some of the responses we got. So let's see. I did like a little poll on our newsletter. So one thing that came through was trends in the design job market and hot skills.
I would love to bite on that.
Yeah. Somebody else said how to stand out in a saturated market. But that also kind of ties into then something that they wrote in, which is how do you write a message to a hiring manager or recruiter that will make you stand out? Or should I not?
I love that.
Yeah.
No.
Or should I not bother? I haven't gotten many responses from any messages I've sent to recruiters or HMs, hiring managers.
Yeah, might be the wrong message. Might be a few tweaks there that could help get a better response, improve your chances of a response. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just kind of a general thing I'm hearing in the market right now too, is just, and this is for all levels, like all levels of designers, it's just like, I feel like people feel like they're hitting a brick wall, like they're applying. And I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to, like interviews that I've had just, in the past week or two, like people are like, if I can get that on-site interview, like, meaning like a face-to-face recruiter interview, just like round one, they're like, I know I could do great, but it's just like getting into that round one and like getting FaceTime with somebody. It's like, that's the biggest hurdle that I think a lot of people are feeling right now.
Yeah. Which means that something's not translating in what they're putting across to be selected for round one. If we're assuming that the company is actually interviewing and is intending to hire, then they are selecting someone to speak with, and you want to be that someone that at least gets in the room to show the goods that you're saying that you've got. But whatever you're putting out there is not giving enough of a signal to them to invite you in to share more. So that to me is like, you've got to do some tweaks there to the portfolio or something like that. I think we covered a lot of ground on that last week. I'd love to hear from both of you, because I think that you also get many, many messages, like all of us recruiters do, like many hiring managers do at the moment. What is a good message? Like, what is a message that gets a response or something like that, versus what's a message that maybe doesn't warrant a response? Or what are you seeing there? Let's try and give some people some insights on that.
I mean, obviously we always talk about personalizing, right? So I really love when people send me a message after they've read something that I posted, or they followed me for a long time and they like my vibe or whatever. So sort of like starting, some people do. So starting out with that, just sort of mentioning something that I posted or anything that I sort of stand for on my page. That's why it's like LinkedIn is really important. We can talk about that later today too, in terms of how to like really fill that out. But then just getting right to the point too. Please don't, like, I get really long messages, and on LinkedIn, if I'm on Messenger and I have to scroll up, sometimes it doesn't work, or it's just like I can't figure it out and I'm on the go. So, I think we all have our emails, and email is easy or also possible, but just keep it really short. Send your portfolio across, attach your resume, tell me what you're looking for. Assume that we don't know anything. We don't know about you, so we need to know, like, why should we chat with you, kind of thing. If you're just looking for advice, we can definitely set something up too, but I think just keeping it short and sweet.
Short and sharp, a little bit personalized. Joanne, you were saying the other week that you ran like a particular ad or had sort of put something out there saying that you were looking for a designer for a particular role and got inundated with messages and had to kind of put a pause on it. I have a feeling that 90% of those messages were a little bit off the mark, didn't give you a reason to want to engage with that particular person that was reaching out to you. Like, what's the difference between someone responding to your request? You want a designer, you have a specific role on, you're putting it out there, you get 100 messages. How do you know which ones to get back to and which ones clearly haven't really read what you've put out there or something like that? Like,
Yeah. So I would say some of it is just dumb luck, right? Like, it's timing, like, right?
Yeah.
Like, I put something up there at like
Always
3
timing.
o'clock in the afternoon, and I get, I don't know, 50 submissions within like the first hour. And that's kind of when I'm like, I'm in the mode, like I'm in search mode. Like, I posted it and I'm like ready to like look through portfolios. So I'll probably spend that first hour like concentrating on it. But then if people are writing me like that night or the next day, I may have already just reached a threshold of the number of people that I can just keep in my head and people that I want to focus on. So some of it's just kind of being at the right place at the right time. So I guess like the tagline on that would just be, just live on social media. Don't sleep. Just, take Adderall. Stay up all night. No, I'm kidding. But be checking your LinkedIn constantly. Like, be active on there. So I think that's a big thing. I think another thing too, and I like what you said, Erica, about just like making things really personalized. And I think like name dropping, both in terms of how did you find me? Do we know people in common? And that's super easy on LinkedIn. Like, if we're second connections or even third connections, second connections, you can see if we know people in common. So if those are people that I like and respect, I'm like, oh, okay, check. Awesome. Good. We know some good people in common. if somebody actually referred you to me, like they actually sent the role to you, and then you're like, oh, this looks great. And especially if I know that person, like drop that person's name, like in the subject line, first
In the
line of the
subject
email.
line.
It's really, really obvious, right? Because those warm connections, and the same thing goes for us. Like when we're, looking for new business and new clients to work with, that personal connection, that personal introduction is going to get us conversations way faster than just like, hey, I'm Joe Schmo and I want to work with your company, So it works both ways. And then the other piece of name dropping is if you've worked with, like if you're on the agency side and you've worked with really big clients, drop your client names again, like really early on. This is not your time to be humble. Like this is your brag sheet, right? Like this is your time to be like, hey, I work with these really big brands. And, on the client side, it's like, if you work at really great brand companies, awesome. If the brands maybe aren't as recognized, what are some things that make them stand out? Like maybe it's a company that's like a really great like the best kept secret company. Like I've worked with clients like that I love to work with because I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to like spread the gospel about this company that nobody knows about. But like, oh, like is this startup like, growing rapidly? Is it like, $200 million in funding? Like, okay, it's got some legs. Like, what are some like VC companies that have funded them? Like, are they big names that I've heard of? So just like anytime you can drop a name that somebody's going to be like, ooh, that's impressive, or like, ooh, I respect that, I would do it really early on.
It's a value. I think the core of that is you're giving value to your receiver, the recruiter, the hiring manager. You're creating a value as to why they want to speak to you. And I think too much right now is just, unfortunately, many people are trying to just spray and pray is the term that we hear in the recruitment game. And it's sending a generic message to anyone and everyone and sort of saying, hello, I'm a designer. You are looking for a designer. Can we speak for 15 minutes or whatever it might be? To me, there is no value and no reason why I need to speak to that person. You haven't given me any real reasons, any value. I need a very specific designer 9 times out of 10. And I think we all, when we talk about the roles that we're hiring for, and I look at companies that are hiring designers right now, there is something about the designer that they need that is quite specific. So one, not just any designer is going to do. So seeing what kind of designer that they need and then giving some sort of value as to, what it is that you do that they can use as well. And that's where some of that name drop could be like an adjacent company or something like that. That's value. That's a value. There's a reason I want to speak to you now. There's a reason why I want to do that. If you don't give me the value, I don't have the time to take a chance. Take a chance. Zero time left on anyone. So we're all precious with our time. I need the value up front to know why to get on the phone with you as well. And that's kind of the reality of, I think, where it is. So
can I add to that quickly?
Please.
Sorry.
Go for it.
There are so many companies out there, right? And I think it's really important now to describe the company that you're at. Like give us like a 1-line, 2-liner about like, what does your company do, especially if we have not heard of it. Obviously, we've heard of the big ones and, the second layer underneath that. But if we're looking for someone with productivity tool experience and you work for a productivity tool company, but we've never heard of it because it's early or it's whatever, just describe it. Like say, I work for this company. This is what they do, kind of like XYZ companies that are more popular and mainstream. And I say that also like on your resume too. Like if we don't know the company, we're going to go look it up. It's going to take us time away from like your page and we're going to go learn about that and then come back to you. Just describe it. Just give us like 1 or 2 sentences. What does this company do? That's it.
Yeah. If we even have time to look that up, right? Like oftentimes it's just kind of like, I'll just kind of let it wash over me because we're looking at so many profiles, right? So I think that's a great idea. I think also like in case studies too, if they're describing a case study for a certain client and it's not really known like what the client does, or even if the client is known, but it's like there's a very specific project you're talking about that has, you're going after something specific in this case study to really kind of give context before you jump into things. Right. In the case study. Also, when you're like talking with us, talking with the hiring managers, just to provide that context, like before you start jumping into like, oh, here's what I did in X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, well, why was that? Why did this project even exist? Like, what were you trying to build? What was the pain point you were solving for? Just to kind of like provide, it's like good storytelling, right? Like good UX people are good storytellers. So
I use that as a differentiator sometimes with when I'm determining someone's kind of leveling as well. I definitely think, I've worked with a lot of earlier stage designers that can't necessarily explain some of that context, and that's okay. It's earlier days for them, but a more senior experienced designer, especially one that's presenting themselves to me as being quite senior, it's like, I want to know the why behind this stuff. And if you can't explain it to me, then I don't have the confidence that you operate at the senior level, and therefore how can I help, pitch you to someone as being quite senior? So context, understanding the why, like it's got to be there. You've got to know it. Why did you do that feature? Oh, it just, that's what we did. Okay, great.
Right. Like what business problem did it solve?
Yeah, and why did it solve? How do you know it's solved? Did it? But yeah, I think if you carry with you an understanding of like, if you're going to ask for someone's time, you've got to tell them why. Like you're asking for our time to speak, you're asking to get interviewed. It all starts with asking to be interviewed, being shortlisted, submitting for a role, whatever it might be, doing your outreach. You're asking for their time to speak with you. Why? Why is someone going to do that? Just give a couple of nuggets. Give me something. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've even created a keyboard shortcut for myself because people reach out to me every day and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. And that's it. And they don't share a link to their work. They don't share. I'm like, okay, sure, let me follow up and ask for your work. But in a way, you get busier people. They haven't got time to go around and ask now, oh, can you please send me your work? I'll go find it myself. No, it's not going to happen. You've got to put a complete package in your message too. Provide enough of what is needed that person doesn't have to come back and say, oh, thanks for the message, but I don't know any, like you haven't given me a link to your work, nothing.
Right. It's like how you brand yourself, right? Like, are you a business savvy designer? If you're a business savvy designer, you're like, okay, I'm going to give this person everything up front, not too much, just the right amount, but give them work up front, give them the portfolio password for God's sakes, just all those things that we need to in order to make a decision. Because if somebody does reach out to me like that, and that happens, I'm sure to all of us, I just instantly, it's not that they're like, oh, I'll never do work with this person, but it does register, and I'm like, oh, I'm leveling them down in my mind. Like this is a more junior person that doesn't really understand how business is done. And I think especially now that companies are being very cost conscious, there's a lot of candidates on the market. So having that really specific fit is very important. I think now more than ever, it's really important to show business acumen, both in how you're interacting with people, but also just like using metrics, putting metrics on your resume, talking about business impact. User impact, of course, I think is like, de rigueur for designers, but I think more and more, I've just seen like every year that passes, it's becoming more and more important to companies to know how to talk about it from like a business standpoint, a business strategy, design strategy, like higher level thinking. So, I'm just going to be honest with you sometimes. And I think a lot of people probably feel this way, that like metrics can be BS, right? Like, can you really say like, oh, my work on this thing actually created a 90% retention rate? Like, can you really say that? If you can like, harness the data as best you can, talk to your product people that you're working with and come up with some like, either it's hard and fast metrics or it's soft metrics, right? Like this, it made another engagement happen, or if it's an agency side, like, oh, the client was really happy with our work and it amounted into like another $1 million deal, whatever it might be. But I think just to have that business mind is just crucial right now.
It can really set you apart. And that's the biggest challenge in the market is I think people are really looking for that someone that sets themselves apart. We only have one role. We have 100 people, 200 people, 300. Of course, we're going to try and hire the best. So how do you try to set yourself apart and be the best and really put it out there and not just fall into the sea of sort of generic style applications as well? We do have a quick little question there. Do you think all CVs portfolios are getting reviewed by companies at the moment? Do you think the mass applications are having a factor on getting to first stages? We sort of just covered a bit of that. Thanks for the question, by the way, Lucy. I think for the most part, you'll find with design that I think a lot of companies really do review every applicant that comes through. There's only so much that you can automate it. I think that the automation will cut out, your typical outliers. I know LinkedIn does it, for example, on the back end. If you are hiring, say, in the US, you can almost automatically decline anyone outside of the US that applies. So there is some very simple filtering that can go on. So I might not see those applicants outside of the US. So yeah, I think still for the most part, everything's getting reviewed. But that's
just
what,
taking a while.
Sorry?
Oh, it's just taking a long time.
Takes a long time. People are spending less time on reviewing because they've got so many to review. So therefore, if you're not catching their attention really quickly with the right information, the right things, they've moved on to the next applicant. So yeah, the reviewing's happening, but the threshold to then convert to first stage, I think, is higher than it has been before.
I have a feeling too that I think because there is such a onslaught of applicants or applications coming in with each job, I have a feeling that a lot of companies are probably outsourcing that initial sourcing to somebody really junior in the company. And, maybe it's getting just screened out by a bot. I don't know. I mean, it'd be great to talk to people that are like internal recruiting teams at companies to find out more about that. But, from our like third party vendor perspective, I wonder if that's happening too. Like, I wonder if it's are keywords not being found. And so then the resume doesn't actually make it through to the person. I just don't know. Yeah. But I will say for my own, like, when I posted that story, when I posted the job and got like 300 applicants and oh my gosh. And like, I only really kind of spent time on like the first hour or two of applicants that I got. I may not review ones that came later for that particular job. I'll probably review them at some point, but it might take me weeks to dig out.
Yeah.
Like we have a job right now, for like a visual digital designer in New York for a startup, but I'm really leery to post it on LinkedIn because I just know it's going to be so many hours of work. And I'm also just the kind of person that I don't want to ignore anybody. Like, I don't want anybody to feel like they're unacknowledged. There's already like so much like fraught emotion going on in the industry right now. Like, I don't want to add to that energy, but it might take me weeks to get back. And the job will probably be, pretty far along, if not filled, especially if it's freelance at that point. So yeah.
I remember I did a stream not too long ago. Oh, it was probably a minute ago, but our good mate Ariel was on that, and she was at Pinterest at the time, and she gave a very quick use case of, they can field over 1,000 applicants to a design role pretty easily at somewhere like Pinterest. They do use some keyword searching within the applicant pool to find people that are going to be relevant as well. So if I'm recalling correctly, Ariel's piece of advice was, really making sure that in this case, your resume had the right keywords about your experience and you weren't just kind of glazing over too much and just saying, oh, designer. It's like you had to go a little bit deeper, and even right through to the way that they might include diversity and inclusion into some of their searching as well, and having certain keywords on your resume help them discover you in a sea of 1,000 people. So some of that searching is done. And I guess in that case, a sea of 1,000 people, did everyone get looked at? Maybe not, but some searching was done within that 1,000 people. So I think that some of that is going on too. I do really feel like with this question, and I see another question in here asking about exactly how an ATS works. I really feel like it's the least of your worries if you're stressing about that. Like, if you are a great designer and you have great work and you are working on other angles like building your network, directly communicating with other designers, other hiring managers, doing more of these angles, trying to beat an ATS is not the best use of your time as a designer. I really don't think it is.
I will say one piece of that, I agree with you. I think one piece of that is that you just want to make sure your resume is scrapable, meaning that it's not like a single image file, like a PNG file, I think, are not scrapable. I don't think a lot of people do that anymore, but just make sure it's in like PDF, Word. I kind of don't like Word.
I've heard Word is not great.
Okay, so Word isn't good. Okay, so PDF.
I think Word is gross.
So PDF is good.
Gross.
I don't want a Word doc from a
I
designer.
hate Word.
I don't either. But I think we got a lot of questions when we did this 2 weeks ago from people that are like, I've got my like designy resume, and then I've got my Word resume that I hear works for ATSs. And so somebody wrote me and they're just like, well, what do you think of this resume? Which was like a beautifully designed PDF. And I'm just like, all right, let's test it. I'll put in my ATS and I'll let you know if it uploads. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's fine. So I think people get a little worried about that. But I think as long as it's not like a single image file, you should be fine.
Because
then it will just like show up as nothing in the ATS, and then you won't, and then they'll never know about you.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
PDF is the way to go.
Yeah, just knowing how some of that works is fine. And there's a million products out there now, I think, that can scan your things. But yeah, again, I really think as a designer, worry about being a great designer. Don't worry about trying to beat an ATS, because they're very different things. Speaking of some of these keywords and stuff like that, Erica, you had mentioned earlier in the week about a really interesting post you'd seen, and leveraging off the back of that, and the way that someone can talk about their experience and kind of break things down a little bit more to really highlight more specific skills. I think in the case you were referring to, it was an engineering role.
Yeah, I'm finding it right here. Let's see here.
-2 points.
I can't remember it. I feel like it was 100 years ago. It was last week. Okay, this is geared more towards like LinkedIn, right? It's really, so designers historically have not played around on LinkedIn, right? You used to get work on like Working Not Working or Behance or Dribbble, sites like that. Gotta tell you, I have not used Dribbble or Behance since 2017 to look for anyone. I just don't use it. It's really, I don't know. But now everyone really needs to be on LinkedIn. You have to be growing your network. You don't have to post all the time. You don't have to do any of that. If you don't want to say anything, that's fine. But commenting, engaging on posts, you can connect to, I think, 100 new people per week. So you can send those requests out, obviously personalize them, if but, put the details on your LinkedIn. So what I tell my clients is to put everything on your resume and more. Like your LinkedIn should be the extension of your resume. That's where we're going to go look at you. It's kind of like a pre-check background check to, like I said, I think last week, make sure you are the same person on your resume. And then, there's so many things that you can add. You can add companies that you follow or organizations that you volunteer with. Just kind of fill it out. Tell us a little bit more about you, please. I think that be relatable. It just takes one person to be able to be like, oh, cool. I want to talk to her about her rescue dog or whatever. And then recommendations. So you can ask old colleagues, current colleagues, friends within reason, to write a recommendation. Because kind of what Joanne said is we can see who our common connections are. If we know somebody at that company, or we know that company that they came from, it's just it's extra for you. But if, I talk to so many designers who have nothing other than the company and the title they had at whatever. And on our end, on hiring managers, internally and externally, we do searches. We do big searches for people, and we put keywords in sometimes. And the more times, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the more times you write something, the quicker you'll come up in the list, right? If you say user journey maps, whatever, 1 million times, or in every role that you've had, I do believe that you'll come up sooner in the sort of search list, right? Versus if you have nothing of that sort on your page.
Yeah, it matters. And I think, again, as designers, there are so many that have strengths in certain areas. Data visualization. The last 2-3 companies you worked at, you really championed their dashboards and these really interesting data visualizations that you did. Please tell me, because they could have been small companies that I've not heard of, I don't know anything about, but that's a great skill. That's an amazing strength and experience that you have, and now forms a bit of a through line. Oh, that's something that you're really good at. Just simply adding that under the, your role in your experience section, giving me a little bit to go on what did you work on there, especially if it was a large company too. I must say, the amount of large companies that people work at with many, many products in many different areas, B2B products, B2C products. Like, if you don't tell me, I'm guessing, and I could guess wrong. And if I guess wrong, then it's a false negative, and you just missed your shot. So maybe alleviate some of that guessing too. Move some of those variables and stack them a bit better in your favor.
Yeah, and I think, oh yeah, I was going to say too. Like, I think LinkedIn kind of feels like casual resume.
Yeah.
Like resume. I like to see resumes more formal. Like if I see, informal language or like a lot of abbreviations or things like that seem kind of casual, I tend to be a little turned off from that. That's just my personal take on it. LinkedIn, I feel like, is a place where you can let your hair down a little bit and be, like, you can kind of be yourself. Let your personality come through. And I think on a resume, it's great to be like, oh, here's my hobbies and interests. Like I always love to see that at the bottom of a resume. Wouldn't highlight it necessarily, but LinkedIn, I think, you can have more like voice. Like you can let your true voice come out a little bit more and just describe, yes, what you've done. Like, give me the stuff that I can work with, but like, what makes you you? Like, what's your, you can talk about like what your superpower is. Like there's a little bit of space for that on your resume. Like maybe there's like a little intro or objective or something. I always like to see those too, as long as they're not generic, as long as it's not like I'm a team spirit person, collaborator, deadline oriented. Like what actually makes you really special? Like, what do you love about yourself? And think back to like, okay, jobs that you've had where people are like, oh, wow, like you're really good at this. Or maybe you had performance reviews where it's like, oh, this is your standout quality. Or maybe even just to like do a self-assessment, just to sit down and like write a list of, okay, here's some things that I want to improve on. Like, here's some things, like here's my goals for the next year or 5 years. Like, here's where I want to grow. But here's where I feel like I could really leverage my skills. Like, this is just what makes me and makes me really great at what I do in these areas. And I've heard this, or I have a feeling, or there's actually this great book that Razorfish back in the day used to give to everybody who joined called Now Discover Your Strengths. I really like it. It's an actual, like, I think you can get probably an ebook as well, but the physical book. It's an actual book. It's an actual real analog book. It's got pages and like words. You read it and you hallucinate, like you think of things. It's pretty amazing. But and I think it's the Nielsen Norman group, if I'm not mistaken, but they basically came up with like 16 skills, like 16 major like qualities of a person. And then you take this quiz. It's a pretty intense, like half an hour quiz you take online. And then it gives you your top 3 skills. And basically the whole concept of what Razorfish did was like, instead of trying to chase skills that maybe like you're not so great at, but you feel like you should do because that's part of your still fine. But like, instead of doing that, like get a job where it's like you're able to really express who you naturally are and what you're naturally good at. So to just, because you already have a leg up on other people that maybe need to develop those skills, but you already have them in spades. Like that's how you're brought into this world. Like that's your natural stuff. So I thought that was great.
I like that. I like
those soft skills, definitely.
They don't go unnoticed. I want to shift it up a little if we're cool. And you mentioned it earlier, I think, Joanne, around hot skills, in-demand skills. Are there specific things there that maybe come to mind when you think of in-demand design skill sets or types of designers or areas of expertise? Are you seeing any little trends emerge, or what have you sort of noticed maybe with some of that?
I would say, design systems, I think, has been building momentum over the last few years. I think every designer to some extent touches them.
Sure.
But I think if you're like really strong in it, like this is your superpower, and you're probably going to be somebody more visually UI oriented, although not necessarily. I think that is interesting. This is not necessarily a hot skill, like a modern skill, but I think just something that I think people forget about sometimes with design is that if you've come up through the classical ranks of design, like graphic design, where you're learning typography and kerning and composition, like that. I think a lot of people tend to like hide that on their resume, especially if that was their earlier jobs. But shout that from the mountaintops, dudes
Yeah.
and gals, because
Yes.
to have that classic training, it gives you such a different perspective as a digital designer than other people that have just come up through digital realms. So I think that's really important to highlight if you have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Demand in that regard. I would say I think really strong visual designers in demand and a little bit hard to come by. And you can still be a product designer, still be very end to end in your work, but having true strong visual design, I think is getting harder to find right now. I think that when I speak with a lot of companies, that is something that matters to them at the moment. And many companies are maybe not showing as much allowance or leeway for designers without much experience in that. For example, hiring a product designer who doesn't have any visual ability. I haven't seen as much demand for that in the last probably year. It seems like companies really want that end-to-end ability.
Yeah.
And that means that visual ability, your typography, your spacing, your colors, everything, it's reflected in everything that you do, right down to the CV too, your hierarchy on your CV.
Absolutely.
It gets reflected in everything. And that is that difference, I think, where there's a designer that understands it, that comes from maybe that background, that does that because that's what they know and that's what they do, versus maybe one that doesn't have that skill set, which is not the end of the world for that designer without it. But if we're talking about in-demand skills and sort of trending skill sets, I think, I keep getting a big push for really visually strong designers. And then an extension of that, I would say, is like anyone really strong on the interaction and a little dash of sort of animation and motion, and can create those key moments in a consumer app, that I've seen to be of high demand recently. I don't know.
And I don't think the person has to necessarily come from a visual background to be considered end to end. Like I see plenty of people that have like more of a research and UX design background. But yeah, I agree with you. If they don't do any visual at all, it is tough to place them or to match them with companies. But I think if they can just show that they have a good eye for it, and maybe they're using design systems, like maybe they're not actually coming up with that stuff themselves from scratch, but they're using design systems in a way where they can get over the finish line, right? And I think to have that be reflected in a portfolio too, especially like I love to see in a portfolio like a hero image of what the final product looked like, as opposed to just jumping into like sticky notes. Oh my gosh, if I see one more sticky note, I'm gonna scream. But it's sticky notes or wireframes. Like, what is this thing? Let's reverse engineer this. Like, show us where we're going. So show us the Shangri-La, the end results, and then great, take me through the research, take me through the wireframes, like the visual designs, the high fidelity, the low fidelity stuff. That's great to show. But I think having that visual,
do you like to see the before?
Most people are visual and giving them that, I think, is important. Oh, was that Erica?
Do you like to see like the before and after?
I do, but it's got to be done in a very specific way. It's really tricky because if you just show me the before, especially if I'm like scrolling down and all I'm seeing is the before and it's not well marked, I'm going to think that's your work. So I really caution people to be very careful with how you display it. Best would be side by side. So the before is on the left side. So it's like in the past. The now, the current, like the redesigned one is on the right side. But like really like maybe even spelling it out in like big red letters, like this is the before, i.e. this is not my work. Just making that really clear. And then hopefully the after looks significantly better than the before, which it probably does. But then it could be a nice contrast. And by the way, is our video like stopped? I'm like frozen over here.
You seem to be doing some sweet freezing moves, right?
Oh, just me?
Just you.
Yes.
Just me? Oh
But
no,
it's a good face.
It's a good thing. Anything on your side, Erica, like certain in-demand maybe skills that you've, maybe companies are sort of seem to be, they keep asking for this, they keep looking for that. Companies seem to be, more of a push for a certain skill set.
I mean, obviously, there's a great, lovely mix of a designer needing to have all the skills, I think, right now. So from research to the end, including design systems, including interaction and design operations, like all of that. But I agree, like the visual skills, definitely a thing. I would say on the other type of skills area, it's very like data driven. So they're looking for like actionable things, strategy, like how something translated. Also really like strong communication with other teams, like especially being able to hand off and speak well with engineers and product. So, I mean, they always say that stuff, but it's like, it's actually really important. And a lot of the feedback that will come back is like, oh, they have no experience really working with them. And yeah, I think just like, I would say experience with at least one thing end to end, it depends on the role, but some type of, and just end to end product, sort of like from, it doesn't have to be 0 to 1, but it can be
seeing a chip,
a whole thing sometimes. Seeing a chip, iterating, just getting it out there, whatever. And another thing too is I would say mobile is a pretty big thing right now as well.
Yeah, even so, a lot of what I would think are traditional like B2B products that are all like really web-based, they've all got mobile versions now too. I mentioned that data viz earlier. That is, typically a B2B kind of product. It lives on the web, things like that. But now you need being able to think about that in a mobile experience for a user as well. It's not strictly B2C, it's still B2B, but it's still for that screen size and designing for that screen.
I think another skill too that's good is, maybe not as much as like a design technologist or a creative technologist, which I think of as being like an even mix of design and technology, like front-end technology. But I think if you are a designer who groks front-end technology maybe more than the average one does, I think that's also good to highlight. Not that you really want to be doing code for your job maybe, but I think it really facilitates, and to Erica's point, to be able to speak to developers really conversantly. Sometimes developer and design teams don't always see eye to eye. Sometimes it's fraught. So I think really being able to speak their language and know how to draw them out, how to get them empowered, like how to speak each other's language, I think is really great to highlight as well.
Agreed. Okay. I love that. I think, you do hear from a lot of designers maybe asking about market trends and things like this. It always goes on. One, if I were to say a trend, maybe it would be that companies have been looking for someone with just particular standout strengths. So it's hard to say like, oh, if you just know about AI, you'll get a job. If you just know 3D design, you'll get a job. It doesn't matter what maybe some of your skill is, but if you're very good at that thing that you do, there is a place for you. So pulling out that T-shape and pulling out that strength. Michelle asks, let me pop it up here. What about accessibility? And everyone keeps talking about AI and design. Is that relevant yet? Accessibility, nice to have, really great. I think over my years of doing this, it's really only truly come up a handful of times as like someone must absolutely know this and it's super important. I do think it's part of just what you should know as a designer, but are you leading with that? You don't have to. I mean, only if it's truly an accessible role. Otherwise, I'm kind of got to put it in like, do you know typography? Do you know how to use Figma? Do you know accessibility? It should just be part of what you know anyway. I really just think it's somewhat general as being a designer to know that sort of stuff.
It might be good to put in a resume just in case a bot is scraping for it, especially if if the job is wanting to focus on that, then absolutely. But I think most people just assume that designers are thinking about it and can do it.
It should be part of what you're doing. The AI topic, I guess, with design is a whole other bag. I think that's a whole other space as well. But I mean, in my experience, I'm not really seeing much of an impact on designers yet with it.
I agree.
It's not really coming up. I'm not working with any companies that are like, oh, they must know AI. It's not really. How are you seeing all that?
We were working with an AI startup that was looking for people that had AI experience. But I think there's so few people that have meaningful AI experience, right? Like everybody's played on Chat GPT, or maybe they've used, like some AI tools, like design tools. But I think as far as like having to have a strong skill set in AI now, I don't know, but what it does feel like. So I've been doing this a long time. When I got involved in the tech industry, it was the late 90s. And that was when like the internet was kind of new. Like Amazon was still selling books. Everybody knew like, oh, it's like this wild thing. Like I want to get on this thing. Like I should say that I'm a, interactive designer or an information architect, which is what they called UX people back then.
Yeah.
So it feels kind of this, it has a very similar vibe now as then, which is that a bunch of people that didn't really know what it was all about, like they weren't experts in it yet. They kind of build themselves as experts, or they did a lot of like personal, like learning on the side, like what is this? How do I get into it? And just getting basic skills just to kind of get over that basic activation energy to break into the market. I feel like we're at that really interesting precipice right now with AI, where it's like companies know that they want it, they need it, they don't really understand what it can do. So I think if you are differentiating yourself by knowing more than the average bear in AI, I think that actually could be a really interesting route to go, because I think everybody needs it and they want it, but they don't really get it yet.
And we'll see how it goes.
Totally. I'm keeping an eye on our time for our little stream here too. We'll see if there's any specific questions we can get to before we go. But I thought it might be cool as a potential round out for us, and maybe we can do this each week as well, is maybe share a success story from the last couple of weeks, maybe something positive that a designer has been through, whether it's a designer getting a particular job, maybe a designer that wasn't having much success getting some interviews, did a retweak, and now they're in some interview rounds. But we're in a space where people are looking for forward momentum. They're looking for success. They're looking for, something positive happening in what can feel like a lot of news about layoffs, about people looking for a long time. So it's often my attempt to try to share back, like, here's a success story. Here's something positive that happened this week for a designer, to remind everyone that it does happen, that it is happening. I don't know if you've got, looks like Erica's thinking, maybe you've got something at the ready, Joanne?
Well, yeah, I mean, just a general vibe right now. Like I felt like the last 6 months of last year was just abysmal. Like so many layoffs. I was knocking on so many doors, so many no's. It was just a really fraught time for a lot of people. And I think it still is now. I'm not downplaying the fact that I think it still is. There's a lot of scared people out there. There's a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm just doubting myself, and I'm doubting, should I even be doing this? But I do think the industry is picking up again. There's
manifest.
Yeah. Call it in. But it's kind of a macrocosm, like how busy we are. I think it's like a little a mini-cosm of the macrocosm.
Sure.
And we're getting busy again. Not like 2022 busy. Like that was just like cuckoo crazy.
Still, it's a sign.
It's picking up. Yeah. And like companies are, they're working with outside recruiters, which means that like I think that the finances are coming back online again. So I think that it's generally trending positively. We'll see what this year brings. But I've been through multiple slumps. I went through 2001, 2008, and now this. It's always righted itself. It takes time. It will right itself again. It's not like tech is going away.
No.
Startups are still getting funded. I've got a startup company that's just been going gangbusters, even in the down market. So it's yeah.
That's right. There's always pockets of some of that success. What did I have that was super positive? I had a contractor start a new role, a designer. And I mean, snaps for me, cool. But it's more, how did that person get a job? That was a designer that didn't have work a week ago and now is working in a role and earning some bucks. I think in that case, that designer probably down-leveled a little bit of what they do. And for them, it was a compromise of they are looking for a full-time gig, but this contract allows them to work, earn money. It's doing their skills. It's, pretty heavy mobile kind of work, helping get something launched on time. And they're still going to keep interviewing and keep looking for work, but they picked up this contract they're going to get some income for themselves, and they're going to see that through. I think that was a little bit right place, right time. That was me using my network on that. And that was because I had a relationship with that designer and I knew quite a few and I knew what they liked to do and what they looked for. So I knew who to go to when I got that call about finding a contractor. And then the other second real quick success story was I do have a designer that just got an offer for a full-time role. And rewind a little bit, this was a designer that didn't really get an interview at this company quite a few months ago. I want to say 6+ months ago. They actually went away and really worked on how they presented themselves. They weren't doing themselves favors in terms of their portfolio and how they talked about their experience. A lot of that got redone. That allowed them to get in the room with this company. So it's just a starting point. But then they really went through the motions and had to jump through a few hoops. There was an on-site, there was a whiteboarding challenge. There was a few technical tasks, but they turned up, they put in the effort, they used their skills, they were humble in their approach, they were themselves, but they really sort of put in the effort to turn up to these interviews, and now they just got an offer. And so that's where I just think energy is worth the reward as well. That's the point of some of that. They did a retweak of the work, it did a better job of showing who they are, but then they put in the energy to show up, to turn up, to do, in this case, they did an on-site round as well. And that's why that person now has a potential offer on the table, so that I think is a good trade-off.
And that's a plug for using a recruiter too, because you knew the right people to go to. Because sometimes people don't always reflect who they are on paper. And sometimes it takes a little extra pitch through us. Be like, hey, maybe this person doesn't totally match on paper, but just trust me, you got to meet them. And sometimes that can be the difference to get the first round too. So use your recruiter network.
All rolling. Absolutely. Absolutely. Erica, maybe you've got a little success story to share.
I do. I had a designer start a couple weeks ago in February. It was really quick. It was it's a stealth startup, so I know the founder, and he came to me and it was like, I really need someone with consumer experience and mobile experience, and maybe healthcare would be great because it's a healthcare company. That actually ended up going with someone without healthcare, but they really liked this person because the vibe was good. They had a couple, two other people kind of in the mix who had the background of health tech, right? But just in general, there wasn't the same communication type of vibe. And this is, a stealth company, 5 people, so you really need to feel good about the people you're working alongside who's going to build this product with you. So I think this person just won out, and both client and candidate super happy. It is a temp to perm opportunity, so I've been in touch with both sides, and both sides are super amped, and they're just can't wait to maybe hopefully go full time soon. But it was exciting. And I think, I just posted it on LinkedIn and a bunch of people responded, and I did what, I tried to head down one night and just get through them all. But it was good. It was a really positive outcome.
Do you think was there something about that designer's work in some way, although they didn't have healthcare, because vibe is hard to see on paper, I guess, but what was maybe the first thing that maybe stood out to that particular hiring manager in this case? Was there something about their work that at least allowed them to get in the room and show their vibe? Do you think anything like that they did a good job of?
Definitely good visuals, good, setup of the case study, really talked about their part of it, what the, process was. I mean, they had been at one company for, I think, 3 years. So they had really seen it through from the beginning to the end to an acquisition. And I think the other people that were in play were just, they were continuing to interview for full time, which is totally respected. But I think what the confusion was if they start contract, are they still going to continue interviewing? Are they going to be all in on this? That's kind of what I think veered them off that way. Which I fully respect. You never know if a contract is going to work out, and I totally get that. And I think I see both sides, but I do feel if you feel something is good here, you're going to put 110% into it, and you're going to make sure that you get hired, unless you hate them. But For the most part, that's kind of what happened. It was kind of just like the communications changed a little bit. And this hiring manager can make a decision literally right after a phone call. So it was like one interview, that was it. Done.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
That is a great design leader. That to me is a good signal of a good design leader, I think. And I love that decisiveness. That is a skill that I hope many design leaders can aspire to get to, that ability. Is a game changer.
No
it's only
hesitations.
reserved for some of the best. But
yeah,
lots of positivity. More hiring is happening. Companies are starting to grow. They're raising money, which means they need to hire people. Designers are getting jobs. They're getting in the room. They're winning jobs without having to have some 10 out of 10 background sometimes in terms of a specific industry. We're seeing that movement. We're seeing people land these roles. Others are doing it. It's possible for many others to keep doing it as well. Any other final closing comments, I guess, for today? We've been on here for 55 minutes. We've been gas bagging for a minute now.
No, thanks for ending on that note of positivity, Jared. I think we all needed that. So thank you for.
Yeah, we like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's aim to do it each week. So keep in mind the positive things that you see, the little wins. Any time that we can share some of that, I think it's really helpful. And even just trying to distill, like, how did they have that win? Why did that win occur maybe? And what can we learn from that we might, put into our practice that can allow other designers to have a win as well. I'm going to click end stream. I'm going to put this on YouTube. It'll be out there for you to watch later. We are going to do this again. We want to keep it going. We would love any guidance about specific things that you want to hear about as well. So keep an eye on our channels for that. I think that we will put that out there about, hey, what do you want to hear about more on the next stream? And then we can at least start the conversation with some good guidance from exactly what you want to know about. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Peace out.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.